Firstly, I'd like to thank the organisers. I found out about this show completely on the internet. Somebody from what's called the Vietnam Old Hats, old correspondents in Vietnam, sent a message saying the show was on. George Easton House did not notify me in the collection. I was totally surprised to find Charlene and Raphael, I've seen these out there somewhere, who picked me up at the airport, brought me in, put the ticket together, to find this hub, this hive of activity of hanging on the most impossible shows to hang. I've seen the show go up in France, in America, in Japan, and certainly it's come to a place where it deserves a bit of a home in a sense, because there are 3 Singaporeans in this show. I think it's come home because at this moment, or up until this moment, we had little information about the Singaporean photographers. I was here in '98, and I found the grave of Sam Kai Fai, and I found where the ashes of Sam Kai Fai were resting. But I had no information whatsoever about Charlie Chalaka, and I still don't have that much of that, quite more so. We were an incredibly tight band of brothers and sisters in Vietnam. 135 photographers lost their lives between 1945 and 1975. The last photographer killed was a French photographer called Michel Laurent. He was killed 2 days before the end of the war. The first photographer killed was Vietnamese. He was killed in '49. His name is forgotten. First American killed was somebody you probably wouldn't know his images, Robert Capa, who shot incredible pictures of the landing on D-Day in Europe. And the film was destroyed in the lab, or virtually destroyed in the lab, and 11 images survived. And it is said that Larry Burroughs, who was also on these walls, was working in the lab at that time, ruined the film. Not true. He was a T-boy at the time. These images bring you a legacy of the truth. We've never had a war before that's been so reported without censorship. We had self-censorship. We didn't put pictures on the wire or send pictures out of somebody that had been dead, who'd been killed, and their parents or their loved ones hadn't been notified. We were a bit circumspect with torture and gross pictures of body parts. We held these back as a sort of blackmail against the American government in case they put the markers on us, in case they stopped us taking pictures. But Vietnam was the first war that had no censorship, and I fear we're never going to see the same truths again. In fact, we are lied constantly to about the state of play. And America, excuse me, starts wars and never finishes them, and claims to win. I'm sorry, I'm getting political. I've just been in Afghanistan, and there is a conundrum. You have to now be embedded, what should we say, in bed with the Americans or with NATO to go out in the field. We had the pleasure in Vietnam, if you want to call it a pleasure, of being able to go out with anybody we chose to and come in from the field whenever we wanted to. This incredible freedom to report a war in all its gore and its glory, its glamour and its deprivation will never happen again. In a sense, Vietnam also killed war reportage, because now you can't sell a picture. You don't get an assignment to go to a war. Who's going to pay us $750 to go to a war now? War doesn't sell Diana's knickers, it doesn't sell refrigerators, it doesn't sell Jell-O, it doesn't sell cornflakes. Nobody wants war pictures. And as Horst Fass, my co-conspirator on this book, said, no picture's worth dying for. Yes, you might win a prize, you might get a medal, but if you're dead, it's useless. And a photographer is dead doesn't bring home a picture. And remember at this juncture that every good picture of war becomes a brilliant anti-war statement. We seem to forget that. And I think more than anything which the Vietnam War did, it convinced people, it swayed public opinion, not just in America, but globally, that Vietnam was a bad war. And in the end, that public opinion stopped America being involved in that war. But the protests were universal. There was massive demonstrations in London, Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, you name it. The war went global without being a global war. And without photography, it wouldn't have stopped. At least that's my personal opinion. We did change the course of public opinion. So in a sense, we won. But the Americans would like to think. And last week, 3 weeks ago, I was in America, in Los Angeles, at a Vietnamese newspaper with these pictures up in this paper. And a lot of the Vietnamese think that the media lost the war for them. It was a civil war. We should never have been involved. None of us should have been involved. None of the countries involved should have been there. And I think that this shows that it was a hopeless war. I think it also shows that photography is a high benchmark. As Horst said, we can be proud of what we shot and what we said. And this show started in a strange place. In 1989, I got a letter out of the blue notifying me a young Frenchman had done his research on war photographers and had got the Freedom of Information Act and had found out what had happened to some of the missing in Cambodia. I went to Cambodia trying to find the fate of my friend here, Sean Flynn, Errol Flynn's son, and Dana Stone, who was here, who disappeared on motorbikes in eastern Cambodia on Route 1 on the 6th of April 1970. In that week alone, 19 journalists and photographers went missing. And of those 19, we resolved the fate of 10. Dana and Sean are still missing. I got to a little village in northern Kampong province, and I came home with 3 teeth and a filling. I will fess up, I will confess, but unfortunately, those 3 teeth and a filling didn't belong to Sean and Dana. They belonged to an American deserter and an American pirate who hijacked an ammunition ship. But the feeling of resolution, the feeling of resolving that incredibly weird thing of missing. I have a Buddhist belief that if the spirit is left to wander, if there is no place for the spirit to rest, the spirit will be unhappy, and the family and the friends of that spirit will also be unhappy, unsettled, spooked, if you wish to call it that. Maybe you can accuse me of being a round-eyed guaylo who doesn't understand these things. But I think one thing that happens when you're immersed in Indochina, that you have to believe this stuff. You have to believe in spirits and ghosts. And I found remains of missing people. And on the back of that, I founded a foundation to build a memorial in Vietnam, not just to my friends, my mates, and my peers, but also to the Vietnamese and the Cambodians who perished. Nobody had ever looked at a war from both sides of the fence. The only people who won this war, if you want to call it winning a war, was the media. We came out looking good because we'd only told the truth. And we started a memorial on the demilitarized zone in Vietnam, the 17th parallel. We planted a Bodhi tree, the sacred Buddhist tree. We put a shrine house next to it, the white marble Buddha from Da Nang. I came back 6 months later, and the tree and the shrine had died a political death. The Vietnamese accused me of fait accompli, although I had planted the tree. There were monks and there were communist leaders and province commanders and all kinds of dignitaries. It's a step backwards. So I said to my good Vietnamese friends, take me to your archives. I want to find the dead photographer's work. I should preface that by saying, out of the blue, I had a call from New York. A man had gone into a skip on Pier 54 and hauled out 3 beer boxes of all Sean's pictures which had been binned into a skip with his own work when he went crazy with PTSD. Out of the blue, from Washington, came a meter-cube box of all these images you see here by Dixie Reese, who was the first American to be killed in the war in 1955. He was shot down in Saigon during the Binh Xuyen Opium Revolution. And every image in that box was a little brown envelope, perfect instructions on how to process and how to develop. Immaculate, as a present. I went to Hanoi, went into their archives and came home with 136 pictures, which are, when I give the floor to, excuse me, I will show you the North Vietnamese images. And I took these to a gentleman who unfortunately can't be here, so I have to pay incredible homage to a man called Horst Fass. I don't know too many people who have 2 Pulitzers, 3 Kappas. He's now paralyzed from the chest down. When we opened the show a few years ago in Hanoi, his old war wounds kicked in and a clot appeared in his spine. He collapsed. They got him to Bangkok and had a 9-hour operation. He's now paralyzed from the chest down and from Munich. And unfortunately couldn't make this event. He can travel, but it requires first-class aeroplanes and electric wheelchairs. It's a big complication. Horst is an incredible champion. Maybe I should be a bit more leitmotif about things. There's a very famous photographer who died last year of Agent Orange poisoning, called Philip Jones Griffiths, and did a book called Vietnam in 1972, republished last year, 2 years ago, sorry. He also did a book about Agent Orange. And Philip is was a very serious, elderly, statesman-like journalist, photographer. And he said of Requiem, who thought former Hitler Jugend, an old hippie, put this book together. So I guess he who laughs will laugh the loudest. I digress. This is the first war of television, which killed the magazines, killed the newspapers, and led us to this digital age. It was the first war that had video. It's the first war in color. The first that radio took over. It's the first time we knew the truth about what was going on, even though the government didn't want us to know. First of all, we had access. Most of us weren't there to gain fame or money. We stayed because of our friends, our mates, our peers, our colleagues and cabinet comrades. This show was put together for them. I've been accused of being obsessed, of trying to resolve the fates of my friends, to stop the wandering souls. I don't mind being obsessed. I feel proud that I've been able to get somebody else, Horst Fass, to come along, that we got the book printed. Unfortunately, I can't sell you copies tonight because it's out of print. If there's any publishers in the room, step forward and we can do a deal. We now own the rights again. Sorry, I got to spoil this thing. There's also prints for sale, which I brought up from Sydney, from Brisbane. It's said that one picture is worth 1,000 words. I think it's probably worth 1 billion pixels, although I don't know how to count to 1 billion. I don't think this war could have been done in a digital sense. It was the last war we'll ever see done in this way, in such a concrete way, in such an artistic way. I look at the images coming out of the Balkans, Bosnia, out of Libya, and they all look much the same, done with the same zoom lenses on the same all-thinking, talking, wanking digital camera. I mean, it's all automatic. You can always put a head cam on somebody and send them into combat. I think Vietnam was the last time we saw artists on the battlefield. We make pretenses towards other things these days, but we've now been taken over by the moving image. You never remember a moving image. All of us in this room can remember 3, 4 pictures. We can all remember The Burning Girl by Nichols. And Nichols, who took that incredible picture of the napalm victim, was only taking pictures because his brother, Wing Tun Mi, sorry, I can't see the image right now, was killed, and his mother and the wife of Wing Tun Mi, the widow, came to horse and put Nichols into the dark room. He slept in the dark room in AP in Saigon, and then a few years later picked up the camera and took that incredible image. He's now lives in Hollywood, lives in Burbank in California. He's Paris Hilton's personal photographer, virtually. He's actually a good character. He also teaches for us at our workshops, which Mike Cassell in the front here from Canon puts on for us every 2 years. I'm really pleased and happy to meet on this trip the relatives and friends of Terry Koo, Sam Kitai, and Charlie Chilapa. They were blanks in our knowledge bank, which was upsetting. And I apologize to those families and friends that in the book there's not a complete amount of information about them. When we were struggling to do the book in the 90s, we had no contacts out here, and the network of old facts was not very substantial at that moment. So please accept my apologies for not having written for you about your friends and relatives. Today is very moving for me. I was taken by Sam's friends to visit the mausoleum where his ashes are. And after that we went to the Christian cemetery and visited Terry. I don't know where Charlie lies. It's a tough call. The death of a photographer like happened in Libya 2 weeks ago, Tim Hetherington and Bill Hondros, affects us all. We don't realize the sacrifices made for the images we see in our papers or on our television. We just imagine there's some adventurous, glamorous young man or woman behind the image. We don't realize who they are and what they do or what they suffer. People don't realize that we come back from conflict very damaged creatures. We're not safe. You have to be mad to go to war. It's hard to stop war because war is the biggest profit-making thing on this planet. It's the biggest business we've got. And again, who's pushing that? The good old US surveyor, Uncle Sam, France. I like to think I stand for peace. I like to think these pictures stand for peace. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for having me.